Did you know that this third generation Dodge Durango has been around since 2011? That's 10 years, an entire decade. Give it a couple more years and it'll be just as old as the Nissan 370Z, which by automotive standards is a dinosaur. But for 2021, this Dodge Durango did receive a few updates. So then the question is, can this boomer still cut it in the early 2020s amongst brand new SUVs? Well, let's go for a drive and find out. So the Dodge Durango comes standard with a 3.6 liter V6 engine, but under the hood of this particular Durango is actually a V8, the 5.7 liter Hemi V8 to be exact. But don't expect it to be a sporty V8 engine. If you want a sporty Durango, then take a look at the RT trim or the SRT trim with the 6.4 liter V8. Or even the Hellcat with the supercharged 6.4 liter V8. This Citadel trim is supposed to be more luxurious and more comfortable, and it really reflects that in the way that this engine behaves. It produces 360 horsepower and 390 pound-feet of torque, which is enough to get the 2.4-ton Durango to 100 kilometers an hour in just under 6.5 seconds. But you don't really get that sense of immediacy from the engine. You get the feeling that it doesn't really want to rev at high RPMs. It feels more comfortable just providing gobs of torque at low RPMs. And with all that torque, this engine with the all-wheel drive system can tow up to 7,200 pounds. Rear-wheel drive versions of this Durango can tow an additional 200 pounds. But for a max tow rating of 8,700 pounds, you have to go for the RT with the tow package or the SRT or the SRT Hellcat. On the other end of the spectrum, this V8 is not exactly light on fuel. The engine does have cylinder deactivation, which will shut off half of the cylinders when cruising, but even so, it is still rated for 10.9 liters per 100 kilometers on a highway and 16.7 liters per 100 kilometers in a city. The funny thing is, there's a gauge in this digital gauge cluster with your fuel economy figures, and it goes from 0 to 10 liters per 100 kilometers. Why though? Why such a short range, and why is it only up to 10 liters per 100 kilometers? Like the green part only goes from 10 to 0. I don't understand it, because I mean, this Durango with the V8 cannot get lower than 10 liters per 100 kilometers. The only time I actually see the green part of the gauge is when I take my foot off the accelerator pedal and gradually slow down. Mated with this engine is an 8-speed automatic transmission, and just like the engine itself, it prioritizes smoothness over immediacy. So under normal driving conditions, you actually don't feel the transmission shifting, which is a good thing. But it's also not that quick. You can put the Durango in sport mode and the shifts do become more quick, but they're not quite as quick as, let's say, in the Ram TRX that I test drove earlier this year. Check out that video as well, after this one of course. Here in Canada, the Durango comes equipped standard with all-wheel drive. There is no rear-wheel drive option. But if you're watching this in the United States, then rear-wheel drive is standard and all-wheel drive is optional. Except for the Hellcat, where all-wheel drive is standard on that one. The steering feel is on the light side, and it is responsive, but again, it's not really meant for sporty driving. It's more tailored for comfortable long distance or daily commutes type of driving scenarios. It doesn't feel like as though this trim of the Durango is gonna tip over on its side whenever you take a really sharp corner or anything like that. But for sporty driving, this is definitely not the one to look at. This being the luxury trim of the Dodge Durango, it definitely feels that way from behind the steering wheel. The engine is very quiet. In fact, the only way you can actually hear it is if you really put your foot down and let the RPM needle climb closer to the red line. As for wind and road noise on highways, they're pretty much non-existent. The suspension is also very well tuned to absorb a lot of the bumps and road imperfections. So you can go for really long distance drives or 2-3 hour daily commutes and still feel fresh at the end of your trip. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about the interior of the Dodge Durango, because for 2021, that's where most of the changes happened, primarily with the infotainment system and the design of the center console a little bit. It now uses Uconnect 5 and it has an optional 10.1-inch touchscreen. Below it, the climate controls are still physical buttons and they're really easy to use and understand. And further below that, there are 4 USB ports, 2 USB-Cs, 2 USB-As, and wireless phone charging for this particular demo vehicle. The shifter and the cup holders remain pretty much the same. As for the interior materials, it's actually not that bad, depending on where you look and where you touch. The steering wheel is covered in nice soft leather, center console is soft leather, door panels, the upper part, soft leather, dashboard is soft plastic with really nice stitching. But if you touch further down and around the center console and around the door panels, hear that? Hard plastics. Again, most likely you're not really going to touch in that area, but it's traditional American SUV. As for interior space, 6'4" of me in the front, no issues whatsoever. Headroom, legroom, totally fine. Let's go sit in the back. Usually in 3-row SUVs, it's the second row that you want to sit in. But with the Durango, it's a little bit different. So this particular demo vehicle has the captain's chairs. You can get it with a full bench. But as you can see, legroom, well, sitting behind my driving position, and I am 6'4", so I'm above average in height, legroom is not all that great. Unfortunately, these seats do not slide forwards and backwards, so I can't move backwards to have more legroom. It all depends on the person that's sitting in front of me. Headroom, though, is plentiful, and I also have air vents, which you can control up here. Maybe this is one of the reasons why it doesn't have a panoramic sunroof. But anyway, these 2 chairs are also heated, and there's USB ports as well, and a 115-volt AC plug in the second row. Let's go sit in the third row. As for the third row, it's actually not that bad. My knees are gently brushing up against the back of the second row seats, but headroom is really good. So for a 6'4" tall person like myself, I'm actually okay in the third row. Granted, I don't want to be here for very long because there just really isn't much to do here. There's a couple of cup holders, but no USB ports, no DVD entertainment, nothing here. Getting into that third row is pretty straightforward. Just pull on the lever on the side of the second row seats and then pull the red strap just behind the seat to tilt it forward. In the trunk, it has 1,226 liters of cargo space behind the second row and 2,410 liters of cargo space behind the first row. Overall, it's actually a little bit less cargo volume than that of the Ford Explorer. The 2021 Dodge Durango Citadel starts at $55,469 Canadian with the V6 engine. Standard features on the Citadel trim include leather upholstery, heated first and second row seats, heated steering wheel, wireless phone charging, wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, power liftgate, power sunroof, 20-inch wheels, and LED headlights, to name a few. A pretty feature-rich SUV. But advanced driver and safety aids such as automatic emergency braking or blind spot sensors are not standard and are instead optional extras. As for the exterior looks, the front receives some minor changes for the 2021 model year. The daytime running lights have a new and sleeker design, and the front is overall more aggressive in its look. The rear doesn't see any changes to the design, but it still looks pretty good with the light bar that stretches from one end to the other. So, should you consider the Dodge Durango as your next family SUV? Well, if you're looking for a mid-size 3-row SUV with a V8, this is one of the last ones out there. Technically, the BMW X5 and the Mercedes GLE are available with a V8 engine, but you have to go to AMG or the M division to get it. For a more attainable price, Dodge Durango is the one. It's very comfortable, especially in the Citadel trim. It's luxurious and it can also tow quite a bit. But if you want something more sporty, there's always the SRT and the SRT Hellcat as well. So I'm actually quite surprised by the Dodge Durango because yes, it is a decade old now, but in terms of providing comfort, it's actually really good. It does that job really, really well. Sure, a few of the materials inside the cabin are still questionable. Okay, they're cheap plastics, but for the most part, the stuff that you actually touch, they're actually pretty good. And like I said, it's really quiet and it feels pretty well refined. So, mid-size 3-row SUV with a V8 engine and rear-wheel drive biased all-wheel drive system, or if you're in the United States and you just want a rear-wheel drive only, Dodge Durango is the way to go. Anyway, if you want to know more about this 2021 Dodge Durango Citadel, I wrote a more detailed review of it over on my website. You can find that link in the video description. And as always, I will see you in the next car or truck, or it'll probably be another SUV. Anyway, thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, and see you in the next video.